It's time for more Manifesting Original Rich Bitch Experiences. Each week, we're talking travel, wellness, and millennial musings with a level of refinement. What level? It fucking depends. I'm your host, Ava Bilkey. What comes to mind when you hear the word discipline? I know for me, this is a word that I don't care for. I don't care for the word discipline one bit. But I was recently encouraged to pick up a book all about the subject, which is why I wanted to bring the topic here today. Discipline, by definition, is the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior, aka control. And I think this is the definition of the term that most people associate and is the reason for resistance here. When I hear control, I feel very constricted. I feel like perhaps control means that I'm not in control of my own outcomes, my own destiny. There's some sort of a body that's controlling me, whether that be a person, a government, an organization. And I think that is why I have such an aversion to this word. However, discipline in and of itself is not the subject of today's conversation. Today, we are actually talking about self discipline, and it is a bit better. So, self discipline, by definition, is the ability to control one's feelings and overcome weakness, and also the ability to pursue what one thinks is right despite temptations to abandon it. This is talking about self control. And it's true that we have to have self control in life if we want to achieve any of our objectives. If we want to make something happen, if we want to reach a goal, personal, professional, or otherwise, we do have to have some level of self control. So, I think self discipline as a term feels a bit better or more approachable, but still, this is one of those subjects that I think we hear a lot about the pros, the benefits of self discipline, but no one really talks about the downsides. And I believe that there is a light and a dark side to self discipline. Too much of any one thing becomes not a good thing. And so when we read about and when we hear about self discipline, I think oftentimes what's presented to us as consumers of the content is all of the upsides. But me being personally a bit of a rebel and a bit skeptical about everything sits here and says, you know what? That's great, but that, self discipline, and I've experienced this and we can get into this, but self discipline, too much of it is actually not a good thing. What really opened up this topic of conversation for me is a book, and the book is called Discipline is Destiny: The Power of Self Control. And this book is by Ryan Holiday. Now, I wouldn't have picked up this book just on my own because, again, I'm like, oh, discipline? No, like that's not fun. So, yeah, see you later. Like, let's keep it moving. Let's keep it light. But I joined a CEO mastermind group at the end of 2022. And one of the very first things that we did in this group was actually read this book. So, me being a good student and everything, I did read the book in its entirety in the time frame that was assigned. And so I wanted to really dive into the subject of self discipline using this book as a guide, sharing some examples of healthy self discipline, and then also ways in which too much of that healthy self discipline can actually become a negative thing. So that as you are navigating your own journey with self discipline, you can take all of these elements into consideration. The book itself actually breaks discipline into three categories, and those are body, mind, and soul. And I think we can keep with that breakdown for today's conversation. And so let's start with self discipline as it relates to body, what this could look like, how it can be a really good thing, and also when to kind of identify when you could be getting into too much of a good thing. Self discipline of the body is a familiar topic in the sense that we're really familiar with things like eating well, being healthy, exercising, getting good rest. Like all of those very basic fundamental self-care elements are rolled up into this discipline of the physical body. And that is really great. Having this base layer of discipline is what allows us to show up for anything and everything on a daily basis. If we take the example of food and eating, this is one where I think having a routine, having healthy eating habits is really important. This is a critical component of self discipline. However, when we take this to the extreme, we can get into topics like disordered eating. So, let me give an example personally of the good and then the not so good. I have the same thing for breakfast every single day. Every single morning, I have a glass of water with lemon and salt, and then I have 1 cup of coffee. It's 12 ounces. And then I have my breakfast, which is typically chia seed pudding mixed with a scoop of protein powder, mixed with, I also like chop up an apple. Okay. So this is my very disciplined morning eating routine. It's great in the sense that I have streamlined this process. So when I wake up in the morning, I don't actually have to spend much energy or time thinking about what my first meal is going to be. I also know that by having this meal every morning, I'm getting approximately 30 grams of protein first thing in the morning. It's going to keep me satiated until lunchtime. And it's something that I have been able to bring with me when I travel. So when I'm, regardless of where I am, I know that this chia seed pudding is something that I can make pretty easily if I have a refrigerator, a sink, and the ingredients, obviously. So when I'm traveling, this has also become something where in my routine and in this self discipline, I know that I always have my breakfast covered. And I think that is something that is really healthy because, again, I'm saving myself time. I'm saving myself the energy of trying to figure out, like, what am I going to have? And also, I am disciplined in the sense that I'm feeding my body first thing in the morning. Not first thing. I mean, I wait a few hours to eat. I'm actually not hungry in the morning, but I know that every single day I'm going to get this first meal in. And from there, it's kind of like the world is my oyster. That's great. I think that's a healthy example of self discipline when it comes to eating that serves me. Now, when this gets too far or overly disciplined, again, we can run into issues. So, trigger warning for disordered eating. I had an experience where I actually joined an intermittent fasting program. And by the end of this program, I was actually so run down and so depleted that I realized that this was a level of self discipline that was unhealthy. And to set the scene, I had just resigned from my corporate career. And I was in this stage of having like so much freedom that I didn't actually know what to do with it. And in this book, Discipline is Destiny, there is a quote around freedom that I love, which is freedom is the opportunity for self discipline. And this is something that I experienced when I was like, wow, I have no rules. I don't have to go to an office every day anymore. I could sleep in for as late as I want. I could stay up as late as I wanted to at night. Like I literally felt like I had no rules. But in that experience of feeling like I had no rules, I was actually looking for some level of control. And I found that through a very strict dieting program. So I signed up for it. It was a month-long intermittent fasting program, and it was done under the supervision of registered nutritional therapists. And so on the outside, it seemed like a good thing. But basically, the program was you still eat like a ton of food every day. You have like essentially a full 3 meals a day, but you are experimenting with a time frame in which you are consuming those meals. So when you start out, the fast is simply just the time in which you'd normally be sleeping. So you'd eat for 12 hours and then you would fast for 12 hours essentially. But over the course of the month, that window would continue to shrink. So by the end of the month, it was like you had a 4 hour eating window and a 20-hour fasting window. This was something that was just, I mean, it was so strict and it was so, I didn't expect it to get like, it felt really wild when I was in it. But basically, what my experience was that I was halfway through this program, and once the daily fasts got like over 16-hour periods, like I just wasn't feeling well. Like I was feeling really weak. I was feeling really tired. By the end of the program, like I was really dizzy, but I was in it and I was so committed to the self discipline of finishing this program. By the end of the program, I could see that this is something that could have very easily snowballed for me into a pattern of disordered eating that is very unhealthy. It was very extreme. It was definitely like a social experiment of the body, if you will. And I'm glad that I didn't enjoy that, if that makes sense, because this is something where I feel like you can very easily go overboard in terms of your level of self discipline. And this is an example of where I can see self discipline turning into a bad thing. I also like to look at it like self love, right? Like, what is the fine line between self love and self hatred? And being able to see that fine line and pinpoint that line and hold that line is really important when we look at self discipline as well. So, that's an experience that I had where I realized that too much self discipline in the area of eating could actually turn into something very dangerous. So I share that because, again, having discipline, having routines, having, your morning routine, your rituals, your vitamins, all of the things that keep you healthy are so important, especially when you have big goals, when you have big dreams. But just know that there is a threshold, and too much of this good thing is no longer a good thing. So other examples of self-discipline of the body that were shared in the book were things like sleep, making sure that you're getting enough sleep, which I love sleep, so I'm like, hell yeah, sign me up for that. Also, like getting up in the mornings. I think this one's interesting, and I have yet to read a book about like personal achievement that doesn't preach waking up early in the morning. This one I think is interesting because essentially the argument is always like, if you wake up before other people, you have that quiet time in the morning where you can dedicate to your personal goals or your craft, and basically no one can fuck with it. And I get that, right? But what if you want to have that time late at night? We don't all have to be morning people. Even though this book argues that most people aren't naturally morning people, but they just have the self-discipline to train themselves to be morning people, this is one of those hills that I'm willing to die on, which is essentially you don't have to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be a successful or a self disciplined individual. And that's my thoughts on the sleep section. I don't know about you, but like every book that I read that has some level of motivation in it is like, get up early, get up early. And I just don't like to get up early. I've tried it. I've done it. I've been that quote unquote morning person and it makes me feel like shit. So if you're someone who also enjoys maybe having your personal time at nighttime, just know that you're not alone. You're not the only night owl that exists. One more aspect of discipline of the body that I will share that I thought was interesting and was a unique thought for me was having a clean desk or having a clean creative space. And this is something that I wouldn't have necessarily grouped into maybe self discipline. But the more I thought about it, the more I enjoyed the concept because the message is essentially that taking the time to clean up your workspace, your desk, your desktop on your computer is actually part of your daily work. It's part of your responsibility. And so doing so actually just sets you up to have everything else sort of unfold in the way that it should. And so you can kind of equate it to, the idea of like eating that breakfast or having that morning routine. It's something that's baked into what you do on a daily basis that just makes your life work better. So, this is something that I have started to recently implement. And at the end of every week, now I actually make sure to physically clean up my desk because I have a tendency to accumulate just a lot of, mostly it's wires. I've got like my wires to charge my headphones. I've got like the dongle to connect the headphones. I've got the microphone. Mostly I'm collecting wires. But at the end of the week, I'm taking the time to roll up the wires and make it neat and tidy because that is going to allow me to do my work next week more easily. Same thing with the desktop. I don't know how you like to save your files, but for me, everything goes on the desktop and then like maybe into a folder later. So I have started to implement a physical desk clean and also a desktop cleanup at the end of the week. And I've been doing this for probably like 6 weeks now. And I can say this is something that I'm enjoying and I do feel like it complements or contributes to my overall self-discipline. So, we love that. The next area of discipline is discipline of the mind and sort of your inner state, your inner thoughts and emotions. And this is arguably more complicated than physical discipline. And mental discipline or your inner state is such a silent battle, right? Because you are the only person that truly knows what's going on in your own mind. And if you are a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, if you are a high achiever in any sense, like you have goals, you have things that you want to do, this mental state is so critical. You know what? And not even like I think everyone has to have a healthy mental state. So even if you're not an entrepreneur, I take it back. This is super critical, but I think I've noticed it in making the transition from employee to business owner because it has just brought up like a next level hurdle in terms of just making sure that I am deliberately nurturing my mental state. One of the specific examples in this book is money mindset. And I think this is fascinating. Money mindset is quite possibly one of the biggest indicators of how you will experience life. And what I mean by that is somebody who has a poor money mindset is probably not going to be very comfortable in life. If you have a positive money mindset, if you have a healthy money mindset, the chances for having a comfortable life are significantly greater. So, when it comes to self discipline here, the money mindset is really all about how you spend your money or how you save your money or how you strike that balance. And the specific example given in this book that really stuck out to me was having a healthy money mindset is being able to have enough self control when it comes to money, meaning you're not spending it, you're not just like throwing money out the window. You're saving enough to be able to say no to job opportunities that don't excite you. And this is such a beautiful definition because this, to me, in translation, is freedom. If you are able to get to the point where you have enough money, you're earning enough money, and you're saving enough money, and you've worked it out in the way that your expenses are taken care of. Maybe you're not, chartering a fucking private yacht on the weekends, but you have enough money and whatever enough means to you to be able to say no to a job that doesn't excite you is goals, right? Like that is major life goals because I think about, and at different stages of your life and at different stages of business, you might not have this luxury, right? But when you think about taking jobs just to make ends meet, taking a second job just to pay the bills, or um, saying yes to clients that aren't aligned, but you really just need that paycheck to keep the business afloat. Like that is such a terrible place to be in. And when you have the self discipline to be able to save and not throw out all of your money, that is that is the freedom. That is the goal. And for me personally, that is the threshold of money mindset and savings that I think is optimal. So that is the good side of the money mindset. When I was thinking about how this could become a negative thing, the example that came to mind for me was actually continuing to work and strive to make more and more money without an end goal in sight. Because there's no number of money, there's no value of money that you could say, you know what, this is great now. And so I think it actually takes self discipline to be able to say, I don't need any more money. And the specific example that I have experienced is actually being promoted inside of the corporate environment container based off of wanting to have a higher salary. So, inside of the corporate structure and business, there is a lot tied to titles, responsibilities, and pay, right? So if you start out as an intern, like you want to get promoted to be a coordinator. And when you are a coordinator, it means you have more money and more responsibilities and a better title than the intern. And then this process essentially repeats to infinity. And when I reflect upon my time in the corporate structure, I spent 10 years inside of it. And every year, right? Or like every kind of promotion I'd get, it was always like I wanted to earn more money and I kept working my way up those ranks because I wanted more money. And that was great because there is a big difference between an intern's pay and a director's pay. But at some point, it's like, when does this stop? Like, this is essentially a hamster wheel of working to no end. And for what purpose? Like, I really had to get true to myself and say, okay, Ava, would you rather have X amount of dollars, but have a lifestyle that you absolutely hated? Or would you be willing to leave this structure behind, start your own business, have losses in the first year, make potentially less money than you did in your salaried position, but have more freedom and be able to travel and be able to live the life that you want to on your terms. And I think that is the dark side to the money mindset when you get so focused on making the more money that you lose sight of like what you even want to do with it, and what it means. And it really takes on an empty value. And so knowing when enough is a level of self discipline that I think is healthy and is oftentimes easier said than done. But the money mindset one is a really important aspect, I think, of the whole mental self discipline that is worth considering. And every person, every individual gets to decide what that looks like for them. But I would encourage you to think about whether you are working for a certain amount of money or whether you are working or whether you could be doing a different type of work, maybe, or working in a different capacity for maybe less money, but more enjoyment. Like, that's the line I think that's important to evaluate multiple times throughout your lifetime. But really just getting clear on the self discipline around what you earn, what you save, and truly what you value. Because being really disciplined around earning money could be great. And again, it could be really important depending on where you are at in life. But if you spend your entire life focusing on just earning money, which by the way is like a man created currency that we've decided to collectively attribute value to, like that's a pretty empty life at the end of the road. The money mindset is an interesting one. Other topics around mind that were discussed are things like focus. And focus, I think, is really important in today's conversation because distraction seems to be like the name of the game. So, having focus and being able to focus is a super valuable element of self discipline. Another topic around this mental discipline is boundaries. And this is something that I talk quite a bit about in the social media context. And so, boundaries around how you spend your time, who you let into your energy, looking out for energy vampires, people that specifically want to kind of come in and detract from your energy. The other one in this category that I found interesting was getting back up. So essentially, being knocked down 7 times and getting up 8 and having the self discipline to continue striving for your goals. So, lots to think about and unpack in that mental self discipline section. The third area of self discipline is the soul. So, we have the physical, we have the mental, and then we have the soul. So mind, body, soul. And this one, I was like, where's the author going to take this? Because I think that there are a lot of conversations we can have when we talk about the soul. But the what I gathered here is that this is really more about the collective. So, when we have mastered or gotten to a healthy place of self discipline within our own physical bodies, within our own mental state, this is where we can start to really benefit the collective as leaders. And so, self discipline is the direct pipeline to self leadership. And self leadership is what allows you to ultimately lead others. And so, if you have an interest in being a leader, it is true that you have to have a level of self-discipline that puts you in a position to lead other people. I think that the example that I really resonated with when it comes to spiritual leadership is making other people better. So at the end of the day, that is a desirable aim to, by being so self-disciplined, having that rub off effect, like your self discipline becomes contagious. And I think this is easy to recognize when we think about people that we admire, or maybe they're mentors of ours, they're friends of ours that have this really high level of self leadership, of self discipline that inspires you to want to do better, right? So, like, one of my friends is like, well, I've got more than one friend that is very high on the self discipline meter. But when I'm around them, I do feel like, damn, they're doing so much. Like, and it kind of makes me want to start looking at my own life and being like, do I need to, it's that stupid thing again. Do I need to start waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning? No, bitch. The answer is no. But you get inspired in that sense of, you're like, wow, like this person has such a high level of discipline. It makes me want to hold myself to a higher standard. I think that is the healthy side of making people better. The unhealthy side of this is when your own self discipline crosses the line into, again, self harm or even self hatred. And I know that word sounds extreme, but self hatred is as simple as negative self talk. So when we tell ourselves things like, wow, you really messed that up, or you could have done this better, or how did you forget about this thing? All of those conversations we have on ourselves on a daily basis that are detractive in nature, that is negative self talk and that is criticism. And for me, this is one that I know that I have to watch because I have always been so self critical. And this is one that I have to watch because, again, it's finding that fine line between self discipline and the dark side of it. So, an example that comes to mind is early in my coaching business, I went to launch a group coaching program. And I actually had a failed launch in the sense that I went to market with a program, I attempted to sell it, and nobody signed up. And that was one of those moments where I was like, damn, Ava, you have failed. And it's important to realize that everyone has and will have failures in life, but nobody is first in line to talk about their failures. So it's something that feels like we are separate or different because people aren't freely talking about all of their failures. You're thinking, wow, I'm the only one that has had a failed course launch, right? That's not true. I know for a fact that plenty of people have been in the same position. But at the time, what I did with that is I got really deep into being not very nice to myself. And so holding yourself to a high standard is important. That is a healthy level of self discipline. But holding yourself to an impossible standard or telling yourself that you will never reach that high standard is a very clear example of how this has gone too far. So, self criticism is one of those ways in which I have been able to pinpoint when this discipline and this desire, this natural desire I have for achievement, becomes unhealthy. So, we want to make ourselves better so that we can make others better and inspire others to be better. And we're all being better together, right? Like that is for the collective good of the community. And at the same time, we have to be nice to ourselves, because the way to not be better is to self sabotage and derail through some of those criticisms and that negative self talk. And so that's an example of, the good side and the bad side to making other people better. So, those are the three elements of self discipline: the physical self discipline of the body, the mental self discipline of the mind, and then the spiritual self discipline that really kind of feeds into the collective influence that ultimately we have as self disciplined human beings. By the end of this book, I was feeling good about the topic of self discipline. I do agree that self discipline is necessary for achieving anything you want to achieve. Without self discipline, it's pretty hard to get anywhere. And where I'm still a little bit personally weary is around the limits or the boundaries of self discipline. Too much self discipline, just like with anything, too much of one good thing can become a bad thing. And so I think that as we are on our personal journeys of self discipline, it's just really important to be mindful of and look out for your own boundaries and your own lines, and being able to identify. And sometimes that's going to happen through trial and error, right? But being able to identify where your line is in terms of self discipline to ultimately have enough self discipline to enjoy your life, but also to not have so much self discipline that you don't enjoy your life. Because at the end of the day, we are here for such a short amount of time. And while it's important to have the discipline to achieve and fulfill the desires that you have for this lifetime, life is also so short. Like, don't be so overly self disciplined that you miss the moments of just purely experiencing the enjoyment of life. I think that's at the end of the day my biggest comma, if you will, when it comes to self discipline. It's like self discipline or self discipline but, because I do believe that there is a threshold. If you are interested in diving into this topic of self discipline, this book, Discipline is Destiny, is a great resource. I think that it should be read and taken with a grain of salt. But I will also add that at the end of the book, the author actually gives an afterwards or a snapshot into his personal experience of writing the book. And I won't spoiler alert it for you, but I will say having him disclose his own personal journey with self discipline at the end of the book about self discipline is really what saved it for me. Because again, I think this is a topic that sometimes can come off as a little bit like, oh, I'm better than you because I get up at 4 a.m. So that was my window going into it. I came out of it on the other side, being able to appreciate and have a renewed value for self discipline, as well as a little bit of motivation, right? Taking away, and that's the point. It's like taking away the things that fit or the things that resonate with you and leaving the rest. So I recommend it. I think it's important. I think it's also important to not push it too far where self discipline turns into a negative thing. Let's move into this week's Love It or Leave It. This week, I have been working on a project with a friend of mine, Hannah, and it's a creative art project. When it comes to see the light of day, you will know. But as part of this project, my friend Hannah was like, I need a bunch of photos of your face. So I was like, okay, let me figure out how this can happen. So, throughout this process, I have discovered my love it and my leave it for this week. So, if you are ever in need of printed photos, um, I have discovered that the easiest way to do this is to print them through Walgreens. And the way I initially attempted this process, I was going old school. I was like, I need a USB thumb drive so I can put my picture files on the drive, and then I have to take it to the Walgreens and put it in the machine and then print out my pictures from there. The good thing that we are loving about this experiment this week is that that is no longer a necessary process. I discovered that you can go on walgreens.com, you can upload all of your photos directly from your laptop or your phone if you're doing it on your phone, and actually have them printed out at the store or mailed to you. So I have learned that there is a very easy way to make photo prints via Walgreens that I love. That's awesome. The leave it in this equation is that from there, I have to mail Hannah the prints. She lives in a different city. And this involves USPS, which, in my opinion, is one of the shittiest organizations this country has. My local post office has a 2.3-star rating on Google. And if this was any other business, it would not be in business. 2.3 stars is the bottom of the barrel. But through some bullshit corporate contracts with the government, the USPS just gets to pop off like the shitty, malfunction, dysfunctional organization that it is, but still exists. So I am leaving the post office this week and USPS because it's never open. It's never open. If I wanted to mail these photos on Saturday, I would have had to get to the post office by 1 p.m. That's when they close. Sundays, obviously not open. Okay, now today is Monday. I'm like, great, I'm going to go to the post office today. Oh, no, you're not. Today is President's Day, which apparently is a mail and bank holiday, and they are closed again. So I'm just saying we need improvements to the USPS. If this is going to be the way that our country depends on mail in the future, there need to be some improvements around accessibility to the USPS, the hours of the USPS, the friendliness of the employees at USPS, and also the time it takes to mail something these days. I'm so fed up with the USPS. And I actually feel better now that I've had a minute to rant about it. So thank you for this. So in summary, this week we are loving that we can print photos easily through Walgreens, but we are leaving the fact that the USPS can exist as a subpar business and still be in business. On that note, I would love to hear your thoughts around self-discipline, where you're at on your journey, which elements of self-discipline you are really enjoying or maybe not enjoying so much. And let me know how this resonated with you. Send me a DM on Instagram at the More Pod. You could drop a comment in a review. And thank you so much, as always, for listening. And I look forward to seeing you again next week. Listen to the More Pod every Wednesday as I share the things that make me more me and discover a thing or two to make you more you.